We are now recording. All right, man. Do you want to get us started?
Sure.
Do you know how to get
I
us
just
started?
realized what it said. Middle Earth had OnlyFans. Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I might have to actually use that as the episode title.
That's so good. Welcome back, Howligans. You're joined once again by Joe, myself, and my co-host Ryan. We are here to kill it one more time with a review of something I'm sure none of you have ever heard of. It's a movie called Wizards from back way back before either one of us were here on this planet back in 1977. It's a film by an animator named of Ralph Bakshi, which my dad had introduced me to this, and he made a big deal of that, the fact that it was done by Ralph Bakshi, who also directed the Lord of the Rings animated movie, which came out the year after this. So a lot of very big similarities in those two, the animation styles of those movies. So I guess what it reminded me of a little bit. This is, I had forgotten before we watched it last night. It had been so long. This is a trippy, just out there, futuristic, post apocalyptic world meshed up with like a Middle Earth kind of a thing. It's it's really a unique beast. And I know I feel bad. We've said that a lot recently with some of the different things that we review. This is a crazy one. It has some it's anti-Nazi propaganda in this.
It's the
It
best kind
just
of Nazi propaganda, by the way.
yeah,
Anti.
anti-Nazi. It's just I don't. Oh man, I don't. What did you think of this one, Ryan? I don't even know like where to begin with it. Almost, it is really something else.
Well, I did ask to borrow it so I could watch it again, which I haven't worked up the courage to do yet. I figured I would just go off my initial impression rather than try to reason anything out.
Fair.
I liked it. I liked it as a spectacle, and I like the story of it a lot. You know, that we were kind of distracted by like what's going on, why is that person dressed this way, why are those two interacting that way, like what's with this guy who only yells. But the story's really interesting, and the story is that the earth was destroyed by a nuclear war, essentially, or at least all, like it says it that way, but really what it means is all life on earth was wiped out.
Almost all, yes.
Almost all. Yeah, that's right. It says a few humans survived, and then it kind of split off, and there were mutants and some humans, and then there were like elves and fairies and these magical creatures that reemerged on Earth after the sort of threat of humans were gone. Like, kind of like the Earth was returning to how it was supposed to be.
Yeah, that's a little bit how it felt.
So part of the world looks like a Keebler cookie commercial, and part of the world looks like a mix of Skyrim and Fallout, which I think is pretty
I like
accurate.
that.
Yeah.
I like that analogy. It's good.
And yeah, the story is really interesting, just that there's now a war between the mutants who prefer technology and logic and reason, at least sort of that's what they claim. And then the other side, which is magic and feeling and emotion and peace and all this stuff, kind of the the lighter side. And it's on either side, it's sort of helmed by these two twins, one of which was like the magnetic opposites of each other, essentially. And that's what
Yes.
it says. I think like one attracted people and was friendly and drew people in, the other kind of repelled people. And I really, really like that. They're like
Yeah,
10,000 years old. They've been around forever. They have this really long backstory, and it's a really rich world. I feel like they probably did what they could with the budget they had, and some of the visuals are really cool. I've never seen anything like it, but they could do so much more with this world. And now I really want to find out if there are more, if there are books or comics or anything else based off this.
Some of the things I found out researching a little bit of this, and I found out there's a line in the movie. They killed Fritz. Oh, Fritz! They killed Fritz. This whole thing. It's a whole little like 2-minute scene with this guy and this this whole thing, but it's about Fritz the cat, which is an old animation. Apparently it's like an X-rated thing
Hmm.
that he did, and it was kind of paying homage to that
That was
in
that
it.
weird little scene that was kind of like didn't fit in anywhere. They like flash sideways to those two guys,
Yeah,
and the one's on the ground, the other one's trying to wake him up. Like what? And then he starts shooting. Then the other guy gets up. He's like, "I'm okay. It's just a little wound." And then
and
they,
then the guy actually shoots him.
and then he's like, "They killed Fritz."
It was there were it's a fairly serious story, like the content wise. It's not necessarily for children, yet I don't think there's anything overtly bad in it. I mean, the fairy queen, uh
Eleanor.
she's yeah, Eleanor is it's really cold. They have the air conditioning on, I guess, wherever she is.
Mm-hmm.
But otherwise, I mean, there's almost like a Fantasia, how the some of the fairies would just fly around in that, and kind of like cherubs or something, that they're just nude and they don't show a whole lot. It's animated in a way that they're not being explicit or anything.
Except
So,
with
but
Eleanor, there are a few scenes where they're like, "You getting this?" Hmm? Like, there's a scene where she's sitting on the end of the bed when oh, what's his name?
Avatar,
Avatar, yeah, the good wizard. He's like,
yeah, you got Avatar, and then
he
his
just wants
brother
to take a nap.
Blackfoot.
They're like, "We have to do something about this," and he's like, "I'm too old." And he just lays down, and she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And he goes, "Well, how about you just sit there for a while and let me think?" And he just like lays back down, but she does this like pose. There were so many little boys in '77 watching this who are like, "Oh,
I
all right,
mean,
I'm learning," or little girls who were like, "I did not know that about myself."
yeah, all right, I get that.
And your fiance came out while we were watching that, walked through the room like twice, saw maybe a cumulative 3 seconds of the movie, and was like, what is this? This is an adult thing, right? Like adult.
I mean, not that adult, but
She walked in when the AC was cranked way up with Eleanor on
right?
screen.
It's not G rated. I really, the animation style of this is very unique. The things that they do. I like the very opening, how it's just a bunch of stills and a little bit of storytelling. And the person who was part of the storytelling, let me see if I can find it. Susan Tyrell. She specifically requested to be unaccredited for her role, believing that performing in some sort of animated film would be detrimental to her career. But she approached Mr. Bakshi years later and revealed that the movie had actually been instrumental in securing many subsequent roles for her. And she kind of ended up regretting the request. So on the movie itself, there's nowhere listed who is narrating it, but she did a good job. I liked how that was done, the story of it, and it's just I've not seen anything like it. It's one of the reasons I really wanted us to do it, because I remember the only thing I remembered about it was one, my dad having recommended it to me, and that's why I have the movie, but just how out there it was.
Yeah.
And this one really is.
Yeah. There are moments that, like I said, kind of look like the Smurfs or a Keebler commercial or something like that, where the art style is very primitive and childish. And then other moments where they'll mix in, like still images in the background, the way
Mm-hmm.
old cartoons used to do, that are really, really well done and really intricate. And they add this atmosphere that really other cartoons don't have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's something about it that you're just not going to find any other or anything in recent memory that is like it. I think you could find some things during that time frame, like that Lord of the Rings movie that I referenced earlier, that does some similar things. Also, possibly because it's done by the same guy,
Mhm.
but it's just so unique compared to anything else that we watched.
And then the other thing with it that was so interesting was the parts in the animation that were clearly taken from live action, because there was this uncanny movement that was just so real looking. And you
Mm-hmm.
looked it up and found that it was in some cases reused footage from other movies, but it was very clear that it was a thing where the artist kind of traced over. I mean, that has to be how they did it. Traced over or painted over old film, like using some kind of transparency, and then they overlaid it or whatever they did. But there are moments where It's a scene from something else, but they've added something to it. Like there was one that looks like Native Americans on like a hunt or something like that, but they've added red eyes and horns and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
to be like the elves or whatever because they're carrying bows and things like that. So that kind of footage makes sense. And then the creepiest one, the one that I liked the best, was the organ player. They have this scene where it's very, like you said, anti-Nazi, but there's a lot of Nazi symbolism in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not exactly the Nuremberg rally, but it's kind of what it is, where they
Yeah.
gather everybody together and show them this film reel. And there's this organ player that they show that's like moving so smoothly, and it's so weird the way it's done, and it's just it added a lot for me. Like otherwise, it would have been like, yeah, this is kind of a like it's a big idea with not a lot of like an artistic vision to pull it off. But the art style is so different in so many different ways, and the mix of these intricate sets and then these action pieces where it's clearly live action and they've somehow made part of it transparent but part of it is colored, or there's something added to it, or there's glowing eyes added to it. It's just super super weird and really interesting to watch. You're like, don't drink or do drugs and watch this movie, but
Yeah, that was one of the things I said. I'm like, you do not want to do some LSD and then watch this movie. It it's just it's a really unique experience, and I really enjoyed that about it. Some of the movies, like you said, I referred to, some of the Shadow Warrior footage was taken from, let's see, Zulu from 1964, El Cid from 61, Patton from 70, Battle of the Bulge from 65, and says especially Alexander Nevsky from 38.
hmm.
So just different things that it took from to kind of make that happen. They're really interesting. And then I'd asked you during watching this, some what it kind of reminded me of was the movie Heavy Metal, which you said you hadn't watched. And so Halligan's, just as a little update here, that's now on my list. We're totally gonna watch that one and do it because that's another unique animation, unlike a lot of things you've ever seen kind of movies. And I think it would be another interesting one for us to do.
That's the one from 81.
Yeah, there's two different ones. There's the Heavy Metal and then Heavy Metal 2000 that came out in obviously 2000.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
yeah, the
No,
original, I
never
have the original.
never heard of it, never seen it. I'm interested.
Can't believe you've never heard of it. Oh my goodness.
I'm glad that you say that. I like hearing that there are movies that I just missed. There are some I don't want to see. Like there are some shows I don't give a shit about. Some movies I don't care about at all. Some that I enjoy not having seen because I don't want to. Like I know that it's like some pop culture thing and I just like being ignorant of it for some reason. I'm kind of proud of it.
Yeah,
But
like me not being on Facebook. I'm pretty proud of that.
well, I don't use Facebook. Like I won't install it on my phone because the giant list of permissions it asks for scares me. I'll use
I
it on
mean,
my computer every once in a while, but like just today I got a text from a mutual friend of ours about an event we have coming up. So like, hey, I'm looking for blah blah, just some message. Not sure if you saw this on Facebook, and it's like, why would I have seen it on Facebook? When have I ever responded to anything on Facebook? I've disabled all notifications. Oh God, this
some
isn't the
people just use
Facebook
that thing
episode.
exclusively, but
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I some of the folks I used to work with try to reach out to me on Facebook. I'll log in sometimes and it's like, "Hey, you got a message from Sarah 7 months ago." I was like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm not going to so and so's birthday party because that was a while back."
I think I might have
Might
missed
have
that
missed
one,
that.
overshot the date. So, all right. So, besides the animation style in this, as you said, the story itself is fairly interesting. Coming from this super post apocalyptic world that it took, they talk about it in terms of millions of years. At one point, Avatar's talking about millions of years ago when they outlawed technology and guns and things like that. And so the time frame that you're working with here is so out there, it's just it's hard to almost fathom that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell exactly when it's supposed to take place for me because it said, like 6,000 years or 3,000 years or something after the end of the world, basically. This life
Yeah.
starts to emerge, and there's this like fairy or wizard queen or whatever she's supposed to be then she has these children, but they live for like tens of thousands of years. And she finally dies of old age and he takes over. And so it's like, and then in the narration, there's a point at which it flashes on the screen 3,000 years later. So I thought maybe this was like 16,000 years after basically humanity was wiped out. Because that would be the 3,000 or whatever that it mentioned in the beginning, like the 10,000 for her lifetime, and then it's like 3,000 years after her death that we see this story. I thought. So I don't
Yeah,
know if
but
the millions of years is hyperbole or what.
if it's not, it's just a matter of the world has just been like this for so long, and that the people who came previously to the mother of the characters, Avatar and Black Wolf, that she was just one in a very long line. In back when it talked about the elves, the dwarves, the fairy creatures, the fey creatures, and things reemerging, taking back over some of the lands that were still beautiful, that weren't destroyed, whatever, however they're trying to explain it. And maybe more time actually passed than you realized. I mean, when he refers to these things having been outlawed so long ago, it's like, wow, how. And he also talks about how long lived he is.
Mm-hmm.
And just it's funny how you see them. It's showing these stills of Avatar and Black Wolf as they're growing as young, quote unquote, young men. And there's a little kind of back and forth scene where the mother dies and Avatar and Black Wolf fight. Avatar wins because he's more emotionally invested in it, whereas Black Wolf had turned away and didn't want anything to do with his mother. And they look vastly different than they do in the time frame where the movie's actually set, which I feel like that's the 3,000 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Like they had their confrontation after maybe millions of years of the Earth turning from what we did to it with nuclear weapons and destroyed it. Millions of years go by, and then these two are born. Mom dies. They have a fight. 3,000 years later, we start in the land of Scorch, and then that's where some of these other characters come into it. They send out these creatures. This assassin who ends up being named Peace. He starts working with Avatar later on in the movie, and he's kind of an interesting character. I thought his voice sounded like Dom DeLuise from some of those old animated movies like The Secret of Nim, stuff like that. It wasn't. None of these actors I had ever heard of. The one who voiced Avatar himself was Bob Holt, and I found out that he voiced the Magua and Gremlins in the Gremlins movie. And other than that, nothing that I saw listed was anything that I really recognized any of these people from. So,
Yeah, he had this weird old man, like old New Yorker voice. He would have sounded right as an old man in New York in like the 70s.
mm-hmm.
But other than that, he was fine. He reminded me of like a Dollar General brand Lucky Charms mascot because he's like small with the big nose and like gigantic. His feet are like the entire size of his body, each one individually. Like he just looks so goofy.
He does. He's smoking a cigar, using his feet. It's
Yeah,
just
bare
the
hands,
character is so out there.
but like formal gloves, and yeah, smokes the cigar with his feet. And the president wears like a weird mask that makes him look kind of like a mix between a mime and a member of Anonymous,
Right?
which is what you pointed out. And then he's wearing a tux with spats and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Everything that's in his daughter, this how the fairy queen is the president's daughter. It's just this whole conglomeration of different ideas that Mr. Bakshi had somehow like wanted to jam into this movie, and it's just so weird.
Yeah, I like though that they all have their own distinct personality. The elf that's with them is very like, let's go, let's get this done.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's into it. Eleanor is first very distraught at some of the things that are happening and then, goes along with it. She's a lot more playful and she knows some of her powers, but she's still developing. So she doesn't have like the greatest control over her magic, which kind of works to their advantage a little bit because she's making things happen that she's not really intending to make happen, and it, kind of, I don't know, works out well for them at one point.
Yeah.
Avatar is this. He's very humble. He has a couple moments where he's like, "Do you know who I am?" But for the most part, he's very humble, and it's other people talking about him, like, "Oh my god, this is the guy. I've heard of this guy," Um, but there's no character who is only there for some plot point. Like, there's no character whose only reason to be there was, some kind of convenience or to keep a secret or to be the one who dies to motivate the group or whatever it is. There's a
Oh,
lot
that's
of
not
that.
quite true. When you're first introduced to Weehawk, he's got a buddy with him,
Weehawk.
and right, yeah,
Oh my
Weehawk,
god, I
the little
forgot that
elf
was his
guy you just
name.
talked about.
Yeah.
He has a buddy with him who just gets killed by the assassin, and
Oh,
then all of a sudden there's this chase scene,
yeah.
and the assassin had shot his buddy from a great distance. The way they showed the shot, like he's up on this ridge, and they show the transition from day to night, and it's just him, like he's waiting for something, and then it shows these two guys, and one of them's like, I don't know, we should go, or I don't know, I just have a bad feeling about this, and they start to go, and his buddy gets shot, and all of a sudden there's this weird chase scene where they're riding on these horse-like creatures, but they only have two legs. And another bit of that trivia is they only animated them with two legs because it was cheaper to do the animation that way. That's just hilarious. That's great. These weird, it was like a ball that had a neck and a head and a couple legs coming off of it that were shorter than the legs of the riders who were
Yeah.
on them. It just really fun. I liked them. I liked the little creatures they rode on. They were neat.
Yeah, there was a lot of creativity in the
Mm-hmm.
creatures and in the mutants and in the design and some of the interactions too, even though it all seemed kind of random. There's the one character who's one of the bad guys and he's just like, I don't want to fight anymore. Everything's got a right to live, man. And then like, oh, but we got a secret weapon. We're gonna rule the world. You can do whatever you want. And then he just like gets up, grabs the other guy's rifle and marches out. Like he's like, all right,
Left,
I'm in.
right, left, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, those guys. It's this weird mix of soldier men who have these like old school World War I ish styled like gas masks,
Mm-hmm.
just animated really, really interestingly, and then like goblins and orcs and trolls and different creatures. They call them mutants, but it's kind of like that's what they remind you of. Just these different creatures, and like these. There's this one lizard creature who's like a little ancillary character, but he's got his own personality, and they do. There's there's really not many except for Fritz, they killed Fritz. Oh, oh God, how did they kill? Like, I mean, there's a couple where they're just there for that, but it's put in for these little moments of levity or things that are in there that are just really used well, not overused. The animation style, the way they do things, some of it's not overused, underused. It's just really kind of well done, almost like a Hawk and Rev style. They knew what they were doing. This is what they wanted to put out. And I mean, you either kind of get it and appreciate it, or maybe it's just not for you.
For me, this was almost like a proof of concept sort of thing. Like the story was so interesting. Like this idea that the world goes into like a mythical, magical state after technology and human civilization is wiped out. I find that really, really compelling. The way they executed it with this movie was weird, but also enjoyable because it was just, I don't think I would have had as much fun watching it alone. I'm glad you had me come over to watch it because, yeah, I was just, you were like, are you going to be okay or whatever? And I realized like my mouth was hanging open and I was like leaning, like craning my neck forward, like what's going on? Why does the
Like when you have to
fairy?
get really serious about a video game and you sit up in your seat and you get really more engaged, like it's gonna help you defeat the bad guy.
Yeah, yeah, but it was really, just really odd and interesting and entertaining because it was so creative and the story was so interesting and the characters have these just really great personalities. I mean, there's some annoying stuff like the fact that Weehawk, like 40% of what he says is just this like absurdly loud yell.
That's
Ah,
his
just
war
this.
cry.
Yeah, but there's so much of it.
There
There's
is a
so much
lot
of
of
it.
it. You're not wrong.
But it's so weird. Like I don't know in terms of marketing, it would be really hard to figure out who to sell this to. Cuz an adult is going to want to see like a I don't know, Conan style live action type thing. And a kid, this isn't for a kid.
No.
This is like maybe Fern Gully but way darker,
Yeah, I
you
get
know,
that.
in the way that it's there's a message that anybody can take away from it. In the way it ends, I love the ending. Like I
Oh.
love the end, the kind of climax of the confrontation.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way that plays out, and I don't want to spoil it because if you're interested, you should watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely. We're not going to spoil that. There, it's it's short. It's only an hour and 20 minutes. I mean, that includes credits and things, but it's so unlike any anything that most of you have ever seen before. I would have to say, I am willing to bet 99% of you have never seen anything like this, with the possible exception of having watched that Lord of the Rings movie. But even with that, it's the only thing similar is like the animation style is going to be a little bit similar. Otherwise, just everything that's in this is so unique. It it defies logic almost in how it's put together.
Yeah, yeah. There are a lot of parts of it that seem very disjointed, but they work. You know, they're just showing you these moments that kind of help build the world. Or you have the moment that's a tribute to the cat or whatever that was you were talking about. They killed Fritz. That
Yeah,
whole thing. Um, yeah, and then there's like these moments of, there's like one little bit of innuendo towards the very end. Otherwise, like we're kind of making fun because Eleanor was dressed in this particular way. Which, if I were to describe it, it would be like a white thong with a sheer scarf tied to her waist at both the 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock positions and draped up and around her neck.
yeah.
That's basically her entire outfit.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one point at which it's referenced, and that's when they go to a cold environment and they give her something warmer to wear. Otherwise, that's just how she's dressed.
Mm-hmm.
There's kind of, a nonverbal mention of it once and then a verbal mention of it later that it's like, how she looks. But yeah, the rest of it, it's just like that's how some of these creatures are. Some of them are just, you leaned over, you're like, that's very impractical armor. Because one of the like fairy creatures was literally just wearing like two small sort of cups on her chest and like a belt, maybe.
Yeah, some bikini bottom looking. It was standard RPG chick armor, like that's utterly useless in actual any sort of actuality. But I do remember stopping to mention that.
It kind of maybe it kind of helps to like show these characters are they don't know anything really about war for the most part. There's sort of one group that understands war that's not the bad guys, and they
Mm-hmm.
wear like normal armor, but the other ones, like half of them are naked, half of them are wearing something like that. They're using like bows. There's a point at which one of the characters drops his sword and it shatters. Like these people don't know war. They don't know how to fight, or it's
So
I
you're trying to say war never changes.
that's right. I'm trying to justify some of their artistic choices, but I think I'm fighting a losing battle. I don't
It
know. I just found it very strange. Like there are things like that that would keep it from being something that you would watch with a kid. In particular Eleanor.
yeah.
You probably wouldn't like that was the thing Tasha walked in for. She saw that and she was like, "Oh, what are you watching?" It's like, it's okay. She's always like this all the time. It's not a big deal. Like this isn't a particularly revealing situation. This is just a character design.
Yeah, this is one of those. Like you said this. You quoted this last night. I'm quoting you here. There's a lot of movie in this movie
There is. Yeah.
with the story, the way it's all animated, everything's put together. There is a lot to chew on and digest with this one, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's really unique, really interesting.
Yep.
I'm still questioning. We're gonna come down to it here, and that's the question of that we answer with all of our movies. Is this a watch or not a watch?
It's a watch for me with the understanding that it's kind of a novelty. You're watching it for the spectacle of it in this weird experience, kind of like The Green Knight. You're not watching it because it's this super, super fun thing to just, shovel popcorn in your mouth and, just have a good time. But it is very fun to watch and like, oh, look at that. Look at how they designed this character because it's like mixing a bunch of toys that don't go together. Some of them are so different in their design. It's really kind of cool. And then these little story elements, some of these interactions are really cool. There's a point where they find like a temple or a church or whatever it's supposed to be, or that's what they're
Oh,
calling it. And there's like a Coca-Cola sign and a CBS, the eye thing,
yeah.
the logo. Like there's all this memorabilia in there from like the previous world. It's really, and they don't touch on it at all. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about where this has like such potential. There's so much you could explore with it. It's like, what is their religion like? Because they do some kind of like really bizarre religious ritual before the bad guys blow the church up.
Right.
It's
That
like,
whole scene was really, really something else
yeah,
with those two characters. I felt like they were trying to portray them as somewhat Jewish based on the whole Nazi thing that was going on. But I don't even it was it was hilarious. I liked them a lot. They were two very fun characters. I enjoyed them quite a bit.
yeah,
I think I'm gonna agree with you. This is a watch, but with caution almost. It's something you're gonna want to see, not because you're gonna sit down and be enthralled or entertained for the little more than an hour of your time that it's going to take up. It's just a really unique thing to experience more than anything else.
yeah. It's kind of like why it's just so different from anything we have today. It just trying to think of like seeking out an experience like this. It's like going to, an antique shop or a yard sale or something and trying to find like old records or something obscure or like reel to reel tapes, which is something I like. It's a different experience doing it that way, listening to it that way. The sound is different, the experience of doing it is different. And it's a product of its time in both of these things that I'm talking about, but this movie in particular, it's something that 150% would not happen today. Like no way would this ever get made, but it did back
This
then.
would be, if this got made, it will be by an art student.
Yes,
This is not getting made into some sort of full length feature brought out into the cinema kind of movies. This is a whole different thing.
it'd be some weird, yeah, artsy indie thing put on like Vimeo, and
Absolutely.
nobody would know about it because nobody would promote it, nobody would want to advertise it, and it would just get lost, kind of like it has.
Now you did mention something about some sort of Conan-ish style, and that I think it's funny you say that because there's a movie, and I remember seeing it for years in an old video store that I went to, like around my neighborhood. This old movie called Fire and Ice, and it's this very Conan-esque looking movie done by this guy Bakshi. We might have to check it out. I think it's a live action. And let's see, at the end of the Ice Age, an evil queen and her son are set on conquering the world using magic and warriors.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's I think the Fire and Ice thing is kind of a cult thing. I remember seeing that box just for years. But me and my buddy, I don't think we ever actually took the time to pick it up and check it out. But that could be a fun one to try and check out and watch.
Okay, I do have another one that we might check out,
Mm.
and I guess
And
we can
I'm
leave it in
incorrect. It
here.
says animation. It's an animation movie. So
I guess we can put in my little tidbit here as a reward for anybody who listened this far to get a little sneak preview of what I want to do if I can find it. I saw this at Slackers on VHS like years and years ago. It is called Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, and it is, according to Wikipedia, a horror parody. That's the genre they're giving it, but it follows a modern day Jesus struggling to protect lesbians in Ottawa, Ontario from vampires with the help of a Mexican wrestler.
that sounds fantastic.
Like I remember
I don't
seeing this cover and just being like, "Do I? No,
should have
nope.
just
I am
bought it.
not.
You
I'm
didn't
not
do it.
trying to explain that to my parents because I was in high school when I saw that. I was like, nope, nope, no. So I just I
You
can't.
have mentioned that one before. I know we've talked about it.
Yeah, I mentioned
That
it because it's such an outlandish title, but I actually looked it up recently and found like when it was made and how it got made and stuff like that. And maybe just anything. I don't know if this one's good because Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter was really good. So maybe Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter will be good too.
I don't even know how to think about something like that after my mind's still reeling from this. So I don't even. You know what? Maybe Halligan's. Maybe we'll get to that one. This is Ryan's got some tricks up his sleeve.
Yeah, it can be on the list. It doesn't have to be at the top. I have to find a copy first or find a place to stream it.
Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there eventually. There's lots of movies out there. And being that there's lots of movies out there, are there any movies like this that you want us to review? Things that you think are out there that, some hidden gem that nobody else knows besides you and your small little group of people. If even that, you got something weird, something out there, hit us up. Where can they do that, Ryan?
They can find us on Twitter at MovieHell, and they can email us at moviehell@gmail.com.
Excellent. Well, I don't know about you. Short movie, not going to be our longest one. I don't even know if I have anything else to say about it. That's it.
Nope, not without spoiling anything. Just bizarre and fun, and it shows a ton of creativity and a really cool premise for a story.
Truly is. This is a very unique, one-of-a-kind experience. And I think both of us are going to agree it's a watch, with those little bit of caveats that we hit you with. But other than that, I don't know. I've been Joe.
I've been Ryan.
And it looks like we are done.